Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach broke a lot of new ground for the franchise. It was the first fully free-roam game, featured the first human jump scare, and Freddy Fazbear became a DILF. I think it shows a lot of promise, and it proves that the AAA FNAF games have the potential to be really amazing. The game had its fair share of issues, but I'm not here to be negative. I'm here to be stupid. I'm here to be creative, which is why I'm making this video. I call it Redesigning Security Breach: the good, the bad, and the buggy. I'll tackle this task in 3 parts, addressing the good parts, which I want to keep, ideas for new things to add to the game, and the not-so-good parts which need fixing or adjustment. Before we get in, I just want to quickly highlight that everything in this video is 100% my opinion, and I'm not making this video because I think I'm better at game dev than Scott or Steel Wool. I realise there are problems like budget, time constraints, and communication between teams that I don't experience because I'm not making this game. I'm just brainstorming for how it could have been even better. I love the series, and now that it's entered AAA territory, I want to throw out all my ideas for how it can be as awesome as possible. And that's what I hope to achieve with this video. Another quick disclaimer, I won't be talking about the bugs. It isn't really relevant when I'm just coming up with ideas and not actually programming anything. Obviously in the ideal world it would have no bugs, but I don't think that's a particularly hot take. Yes, I know I made a bug joke just now, but they're low-hanging fruit and that's what I thrive on. Oh, and lastly, there will be spoilers for the entire game. Got it? Good. Let's start out positive with part 1, the good stuff. One of my favourite things about Security Breach was the way that the mini-bosses, that is to say Chica, Monty and Roxy, played into the upgrade system. I thought it was quite clever and intuitive that destroying the animatronics allowed you to rip parts out of them, which you could then install into Freddy in Parts and Service. Following on from that, another thing that I liked was the way that once an animatronic was wrecked, its behaviour was drastically altered. This means that you have to keep adapting your strategy as you beat more and more members of the band, and it stops the gameplay from stagnating. Not to mention that I love their designs and death scenes, especially Roxy's flying go-kart to the face, honestly my favourite moment of the whole game. Look at the fear in her X-ray eyes. Anyways, another thing I liked was the design of the Pizzaplex. The rich variety of areas like crazy golf, bowling, laser tag, diners, dance floors and arcades all make this feel like the most insane entertainment venue ever, and it's a really unique and refreshing setting for a horror game. It's also quite refreshing within the FNAF series, as most of the fear in previous games was derived from an overall feeling of claustrophobia, being stuck in tiny, poky little venues and crowded in on all sides by murderous robots. In Security Breach, this is flipped on its head into a kind of agoraphobia. It's so big you're afraid of getting lost, falling down into the cracks and crevices and hidden underbelly of the building, which makes it all the more frightening on occasions when this actually happens. Right, the last thing I want to talk about in the positives column is Titanfall 3. Glamrock Freddy. The idea of having a friendly animatronic you can call to your aid is super cool, and the protection he provides only makes it scarier when he isn't there, when your protection is taken away from you and you're left feeling exposed and vulnerable. Honestly, I think it was pretty brave of Steel Wool to include a dilfification arc for Freddy Fazbear. It's really brought out the fandom's collective daddy issues to light. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, gameplay. Let's move on to part 2. More good stuff. This time from my brain. Right, so for this part I've got a few new ideas that I want to toss into the ring. The first one is about the general gameplay. For some reason, the game that Security Breach reminds me of the most is Prey, the 2017 survival horror shooter. The parkour, the stealth, the branching objectives, and so on. I feel that Security Breach would benefit from becoming even more like a shooter, not actually adding guns. Gregory's committed enough felonies already, don't let him get his hands on firearms or rack up more crimes than William Bloody Afton. No, what I'm proposing is that we give Gregory stats and equipment slots. His stats could be speed, stamina, health, and dexterity. Dexterity being how quickly he interacts with things like prize box and save points. His equipment slots could be shirt, shoes, hat, and accessory, and wearing different pieces of Fazbear brand merch picked up from around the Pizzaplex could boost these stats, and particular characters could even have corresponding stat boosts. For example, Chica merch boosts your speed, Monty your stamina, Roxy your stealth, and Freddy your dexterity. There's already a precedent for this in the game, as you can sometimes find shoes or Fizzy Faz which makes you run faster, but I think it could be developed into a full-blown mechanic like the kind I've explained. You have an inventory in the base game, but it doesn't really feel like it's used for much beyond staring at what you've collected. Having clothes that fulfill a gameplay function would encourage you to A, manage your inventory, and B, open all the prize boxes, even if you don't care about collectibles. Anyway, I've rambled about this for too long. Let's move on. Something I think would really fit with this game's aesthetic are vending machines, and some kind of collectible currency you can find around the Pizzaplex and use to buy things from vending machines. Hey, we could even bring back Faz coins. Using his collected Faz coins, Gregory could buy clothes, collectibles, and maybe even special tickets to access extra locations on the map. I think this would work because vending machines would fit perfectly into the hyper-advanced, flashy mall setting of the Pizzaplex. Now, I have a few ideas for tweaking the game's weapon system. You know, weapon in inverted commas, because none of them are actually weapons. But either way, it plays into my previous idea about the vending machines. So, hear me out on this one. What if the Faz Blaster and the flashlight used batteries, while the Faz Cam requires rolls of film to operate? Batteries and film can be found or purchased from vending machines. In my opinion, this adds an element of long-term resource management, which is a good thing to have in a survival horror game. It would also make the weapons you get less of a silver bullet for dealing with the animatronics if they have limited uses before you need to restock them. You'd have to really consider whether you want to use the weapons or whether you can make do with just running away, particularly if using the Phaser Blaster draws from the same battery pool as your flashlight and risks leaving you in darkness later on. I think this change will add a little more horror to the game, stemming from the fear you might be left helpless, completely cornered and stripped of your means to fight back. On the topic of weapon systems, I always thought it was odd that there are only two, so I've invented a new one. Introducing the Phasapult, depicted here by yours truly. The Phasapult is less of a weapon and more of a distraction tool. It fires these little bouncy balls, which make a noise where they land and can distract enemies for you to sneak on by. The bouncy balls for the Phasapult can be purchased from vending machines, just like Phazcam film and batteries. I also stuck with the name scheme of everything in the building, starting with Faz. Does Freddy's ego really need that much of a boost? That's probably why Roxy has depression. No wonder she thinks she isn't good enough. Anyway, I digress. I have one more thing to add to this game before we start talking about the stuff that needs fixing. This is probably the most outlandish suggestion out of all of them, but wouldn't it be cool if Gregory could install system chips into his Faz watch, which let him do extra things with the watch? Some ideas I came up with were a speaker chip, which allows you to play audio through the cameras to lure animatronics away from your position, FNAF 3 style. A motion detector chip, which highlights all animatronics within a radius of you and lets you see them through the walls for a short duration, kind of like Roxy's eyes. A door trip, which allows you to temporarily lock certain doors, preventing enemies from getting to you, FNAF 1 style. And a masking chip, which temporarily jams the sensors of nearby animatronics, essentially making you invisible to them and buying you time to either hide or escape. This is quite a rudimentary idea, and I'm sure I could come up with more ideas for chips, but I just thought it'd be super cool. Whew, we're all done with part 2. I know I've been talking for ages and ages, and it's not going to stop now because we're going to be talking about part 3, the less good bits and how we can fix them. Okay, let's start out with some small things which don't need a lot of talking about. That thing where you can't save after 6 AM. I don't think there's a single person who likes that. Enough said. Also, the game could have done with 1 or 2 more autosaves throughout. All the tutorial pop-ups that appear at very inconvenient times. Yeah, we can get rid of them. In fact, we could probably do away with the pop-up cards altogether. Most players understood what to do thanks to the expositional dialogue from Freddy, and just adding a little bit more would make up for the lack of clunky and irritating pop-ups. Maybe the occasional key prompt for things like sprinting, but other than that we can basically just trash pop-up cards, we don't need them. Jump scares. Some of the jump scares leave a bit to be desired, but they wouldn't be hard to spruce up. The worst offender is definitely Vanny's, especially compared to how it looked in the trailer, but, well, I'll address Vanny later. I felt that the security staff bots could have been made creepier. I've drawn a little redesign for them as basically walking security cameras. I don't know, I just felt a bit more of a robot apocalypse vibe would make the game much scarier from moment to moment. My concept, by the way, is partly inspired by strings and buttons from Popgoes, in case you're interested. The waiters and the map bot and things can keep their original design because it makes sense for them to look more friendly and amenable, as opposed to the security bots, which would only be around after hours. Also, I felt like they should move slower and be looking up rather than sweeping the ground. I reckon it would incentivize the player to focus more on crouching, hiding, and blocking the line of sight between them and the security bots, instead of just running around and not running into their patrol paths. Okay, those are the simpler things. Some more meaty topics now. The cameras. Well, they're hardly used at all. The only time I've ever seen people using the cameras at all is when they're hiding and need to see if the coast is clear. But once you get the Phaser Blaster or the Phas Cam, hiding becomes much less of a necessity, and the cameras basically become obsolete. Most people just tend to forget about them for 90% of the game because you just don't need them. Weirdly, even in the sit and survive sections that sometimes crop up, you're given separate camera systems, which is just a confusing choice. It's like the developers forgot the FazWatch cameras were there. Anyway, I have a couple of suggested buffs to the cameras, which would hopefully incentivize players to actually use them. Firstly, they could highlight animatronics through walls for a brief period when you spot them on the camera. They could also highlight objectives, but that might be a bit too much, I don't know. Next item on the agenda is the whole thing with recharge stations. I didn't get it. I don't know whether I'm just dumb or whether I'm missing something important, but it all felt convoluted and weird and confusing. So every hour the building does a power cycle, and the only way to restore the power is to get Freddy to a charging station, which recharges the building? Or it finishes the power cycle because he's in it? What about the other three? Do they not need to be in charging stations to finish the power cycle? And why does Gregory going into a charging station teleport Freddy to the station? And I don't get it. So this point just may be me being an idiot, but I want to scrap charging stations altogether. But Carp, I hear you cry, does that mean Freddy has unlimited battery? Yes, Freddy has an unlimited battery now. But doesn't that make him really overpowered? Never fear, I thought of that too. My idea for this is that being in Freddy doesn't make you invulnerable to attacks anymore. If an enemy has already seen you, they can still chase you down, rip you out of Freddy and kill you. But being in Freddy makes it so that they can't spot you in the first place. I know this is a pretty drastic change, but firstly it would make the game scarier because that makes your one point of refuge that much less reliable. Secondly, it makes up for Freddy having unlimited battery. But wait, there's another thing we haven't accounted for. Sunrise and Moondrop, or more specifically, Moondrop. If we've trashed the hourly power cycle, then he never gets to appear, right? Well, now we can keep the whole power cycle fluff thing, especially since it provides a nice homage to FNAF 1 with all the lights going out. But I'd say make it so that you have to get to some kind of breaker panel or switch to reactivate the power rather than a recharge station. That way we can still have Moondrop doing his creepy thing, and we don't need the convoluted, weird thing with the recharge station. While we're on the topic of Glamrock Freddy, why don't we talk about his upgrades? I found that a problem with the upgrades was that once you were inside Freddy, you were invincible anyway, so Chica's power, which let you stun enemy animatronics, felt kinda useless. And Roxy's felt situational at best because you could only see collectibles and no enemies. Thankfully, we've already fixed the problem with Chica's upgrade by making it possible for enemies to rip Freddy open and kill Gregory. The stun screen will actually be useful for when an enemy knows Gregory is inside Freddy and they need to make an escape. Roxy's could be made so much better by letting you see enemies through walls as well as collectibles, so that's a pretty simple solve. Monty's claws are fine as is because they're all about accessing new areas. Well, all this talk about upgrades provides a lovely segue into talking about the parts and service minigames. Now, don't get me wrong, I love the idea of these, but do we really need the same Simon Says minigame 8 times? These upgrade sections could be spiced up massively by just switching up the minigames a bit. Now, I know they have to be accessible to console players too, but here I suggest the game take a leaf out of Help Wanted's book. You could have all sorts of puzzles like colour matching puzzles, timing puzzles, gear puzzles, wiring puzzles, and so on. You could have all sorts of different things, and if you didn't complete them in the given time or made too many mistakes, it resulted in a game over. Right, let's talk about the boss fights. I really like the Monty boss fight where you have to avoid him whilst also playing the cannon game to eventually dunk the bucket on him, even though I didn't really understand why there are a bunch of cannons on the catwalks where no kid should be allowed to go, but never mind. I was really just a bit sad that there were no similar sequences for the other two. Maybe before you got the opportunity to smash Roxy's face in, you had to actually complete the go-kart race. Roxy could be jumping around in the rafters, throwing things at you to try and make you crash, because she wouldn't want to get in the way of a speeding vehicle, and if you crash, She'd then proceed to jump down and kill you. Once you'd completed 3 laps, some sort of flag or celebration system could drop and knock Roxy onto the racetrack, whereby you could absolutely obliterate her with high-speed ferocity. As for Chica, her boss fight could take place in the kitchen. Instead of finding the Monty Mystery Mix, you could find separate ingredients for it and have to make it yourself in the kitchen whilst avoiding Chica's attacks. Once it's cooked, you serve it up hot and fresh into the trash compactor to lure Chica in, and then you turn the machine on to crush her. Whew, right, almost done. Just a few more things to address. Vanny. So, what's up with Vanny? She was made out to be the big scary antagonist in all the teaser material, and then showed up for all of 5 minutes and had the worst jump scare in the game. Also, this glitchy scanline effect that happens whenever she appears is meant to be scary, but it's actually just really annoying because it means you can't see anything. Anyway, this might be a little controversial, but I think Vanny would be better if she didn't appear as an in-game enemy. I think she's much better as a sort of omniscient puppet master, pulling the strings from behind the scenes and acting as a mastermind behind the whole situation, rather than something that comes up and stabs you. She hacks the system and makes the animatronics hostile, that's her whole deal. She acts through her robots, and we only see a glimpse of that at the end in the base game when she uses the hijacked staff robots to destroy Freddy. What I think she needs is some more creepy, gloating dialogue through the speakers. Maybe her face could appear on screens and vending machines and cash registers and things, taunting and frightening Gregory through every piece of technology in the Pizzaplex. Anything to really make her seem more present as a villain. And speaking of villains, let's move on to the final topic of the video. Afton. Okay, I know I'm probably going to get some of this wrong, but let's be honest, nobody's 100% perfect on the FNAF lore, so cut me some slack. I'm just here for the gameplay and robotic dilfs. Robotic monsters. Afton was cool and all, but I think he was too expected. The reveal of the final boss just being Springtrap but more burned didn't really feel like it had much weight to it. I also don't really understand why Afton left Vanny's brain to get back in his crusty old body, which had been mashed by springlocks, burned, squished by a death trap pizzeria and burned again. Unless it's the original Afton, in which case, did he escape hell? Is Ultimate Custom Night not canon now? Well, let's put the lore aside, because to be honest, no one understands it anyway. Before Security Breach was released, I saw a lot of people theorising that Afton would return as a kind of mangled hybrid, fusion of several animatronics. So I've given him a bit of a redesign in that vein. But first I want to credit Cyberlord1109 on Twitter, because they did a similar redesign which heavily inspired my one. And here he is. I call it the Afton Cluster, and it's basically a monster assembled by Afton, a vessel which he transfers his consciousness into at the end of the game to hunt down and kill the interfering Gregory once and for all. He uses parts from several other animatronics to make it, including some of the ones burned in the pizzeria simulator and other robots from around the Pizzaplex. I figured that, even though his new form is completely robotic, he'd dig up his old Springtrap mask and use that as the centerpiece in an act of sort of self-aggrandization. The design of the Afton cluster was partly inspired by Cyberlord1109's art that I saw on Twitter, and I'll link that in the description, and it's partly inspired by Molten Freddy and the Eyesore from One Night at Flumpty's too. As for the boss fight itself, my idea was to divide it into 3 phases. Phase 1 takes place in the main atrium of the Pizzaplex. The Afton cluster emerges from a tunnel leading to the FNAF 6 location and destroys all the exits to the atrium to prevent Gregory from leaving. Freddy comes in over Gregory's Fazwatch and tells him that the only way to escape is to find another show disc and activate the elevator which takes him down to parts and service. Gregory has to search through various containers to find a show disc, and once he finds it, he escapes through the show stage elevator, and Glamrock Freddy meets him down in parts and service. But the Afton cluster won't give up that easily. Phase 2 is a chase sequence similar to the DJ Music Man's, where the cluster chases Gregory and Freddy all the way to the tunnel leading down to the FNAF 6 Death Trap Pizzeria. The tunnel's too small for Freddy to climb through though, and he tells Gregory to go on while he holds the cluster off. Gregory doesn't see what becomes of Freddy, but he hears a terrible fight break out and assumes that the Afton cluster has destroyed him. Down in the pizzeria simulator, Phase 3 begins. Gregory has to find switches to reactivate the incineration mechanisms, all while listening for the Afton cluster and watching for its camera beams coming through the tunnel. Once all the 3 switches are hit, Gregory has to return to the FNAF 6 office and escape through there. The Afton cluster tries to follow him, but it's too late. At the last moment, Gregory kicks it in the face, making it fall back down into the tunnel and into the fire. Gregory finds Freddy wounded, but thankfully alive, and as the fire catches to the rest of the Pizzaplex, they escape. They never see what becomes of Vanny, but it's presumed that she died in the fire. They watch from the street as the Pizzaplex goes up in flames, with William Afton buried underneath. Whew! I think it's quite fitting that the end of the game is also the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed. It was certainly a much longer video than I normally do, but hey, I had a lot to say. This video took me a hella long time to make, so why not subscribe and leave me a comment telling me what you thought of my rework brainstorm thing about Security Breach. And be sure to let me know all your cool ideas in the comments. I'll see you in the next video, and hopefully I get it out before more than 4-5 months have passed. We'll see. In the meantime, I hope you all have a lovely day. Bye bye.